SEWA is a nonprofit organization with 43 chapters across the US and many other chapters around the globe. SEWA is known for its disaster relief and community service efforts. In the current COVID-19 crisis, SEWA has taken on many new initiatives to help frontline workers, patients, and families. One such example is hosting webinars on a variety of important topics to keep community members informed. In today's webinar, we have a special guest who will address the immigration issues that many people are facing due to this unexpected situation. She will focus on the visa status issues of international students and temporary workers, especially those on F1, OPT, H1, and J1 visas. Along with SEWA International, this webinar is being co-hosted by several other organizations: Hindu YUVA, Bharatiyam, Vivekananda House, Unite and Inspire, and the Hindu University of America. Hindu YUVA is a student organization with chapters at 35 universities across the US with a vision to preserve, promote, and protect Hindu Dharma. Bharatiyam is a pan-US forum working towards bringing together Indian students and the diaspora to nurture and motivate them to contribute to the growth of both India and the US. Vivekananda House is a residential student center with the aim to provide a vibrant and positive experience to the campus community. Unite and Inspire is a nonprofit organization primarily based in Houston and in India, promoting volunteerism and active involvement of youth, children, and adults to the service of the community. The Hindu University of America is a premier institution of higher studies in civilizational knowledge and dharmic studies, covering a broad spectrum from academic requirements to spiritual growth. And with that, we are delighted to introduce our very knowledgeable and versatile speaker for today's webinar on immigration, Ms. Anjali Bakshi-Rami. Anjali ji is an experienced attorney with over 20 years of experience in business and contract law, business and family immigration, and employment law. She works with passion and dedication to help her clients. Anjali ji graduated from Brandeis University and completed her Doctor of Law degree from Thurgood Marshall School of Law. It is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Anjali Bakshi-Rami. Namaste, Anjali ji.
Namaste, Vandana ji, and thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction. I truly appreciate it. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to be invited by SEWA and all of the affiliate organizations today to be able to try and help those who are impacted, as we all are, by COVID-19. But in particular, we know the plight of students and we know the plight of J1 exchange visitors right now is in flux. And we know that a lot of individuals need guidance, help, and support. And it is absolutely my pleasure to be able to do that with SEWA today. And I hope that I can provide everyone with some guidance and some light and some information. I know this is a difficult time for a lot of our students and a lot of the H1s, and in addition to that, exchange visitors who are finding themselves in the crosshairs of what is an unprecedented situation. And we are trying our best as attorneys who have been in this area for as long as we have to make sure that we're trying to disseminate information to the best of our ability. That having been said, I think everybody knows that this is a volatile situation where the administration is updating materials and providing information on a daily, if not an hourly and weekly basis. And so the information that you will receive today is the most up-to-date as of yesterday, crossing my fingers as I say that, and there are no tweets going out as I speak. I know this is a very difficult situation for a lot of the F1 students, and I want everyone to feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more settled, and a little bit more empowered with the information that I'm going to try and provide here. So without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get the presentation slides up, and we can go ahead and start. There we go. And so What I'd like to do today is, again, address all the concerns on the impact that COVID-19 has on both F1 students and J1 exchange students. With respect to H1s, that's an entire whole webinar of its own, but I will definitely try to touch on those topics at the end. There are so many areas that are being impacted. It's not just your status. It's not just, can you go back home? Will you be able to catch a ride? When will the travel ban requirements be lifted at some point? It's also about, are you able to work? If you're a J1, how is your sponsor dealing with this? Is your program ending early? And so we're going to go through a lot of that material here today. I'm going to work with Sewa to make sure that this information can be disseminated to all of you. And I do speak a little fast, but I'm hoping that you all will get all the information. And if there's any questions, I'm sure that the moderators can assist with that at the end of the webinar presentation. I think we can go to the first slide. And so we want to talk about, how does this affect students on OPT? What is the impact on OPT periods for work? We want to talk about, what are the relief options? Are there any? How do I deal with extending my status if I have to? What do I do about having to change my status, because some individuals may have to do that? How are current and future J1 programs going to be affected? As we all know, that a lot of this took place in transit, literally during March. And the reality is that a lot of the information wasn't promulgated until April. And so it has been a bit unsettling, and there's a lot of information out there. It is good to know that the Student and Visitor Exchange Program is working overtime to try to make sure that they give as much information as they can to students up to date, and they're working and coordinating regularly with universities around the United States to do so and to provide as much information as possible. They do understand and they do realize that this is upsetting to many F1 students and to J1s, and that they have tried their best to try and work with the administration to do that. And finally, we'll look at options and what are your help availability. Do you need to speak with an attorney? What are your other alternatives to being able to deal with your current situation if your program ends? Or what are the options for perhaps changing status if it looks like we're going to be in flux? And I think we'll go to the next slide and start diving right in. So you're going to see quite a bit of information here, and I want you to be able to get everything on there. DHS has basically provided guidance to universities and that they have provided as much information as they can that students can continue this semester's courses online without jeopardizing their immigration status. And the Student and Visitor Exchange Program, the SEVP, that all of you all know very well, has confirmed that if a school closes temporarily but offers online instruction or another alternative learning procedure, which can include some combination of either online or off-campus learning, and if you have that, they're indicating that non-immigrant students would and should participate in those online and alternative learning procedures so that they can remain active in active status in SEVIS. And that's the whole idea, is how does SEVIS get reported? And I think most of you all know how it gets reported. Generally speaking, your DSO and the university will be contacting SEVIS, and they will be updating it sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. When it comes to J1s, it has to be updated regularly. And so that's something that's very important for them to look at. At that point, SEVP has also confirmed that international students can take full-time courses online, either from within the United States or from abroad. So if some of you are finding in your situation that you have actually gone back perhaps to India or to South Asia or anywhere else in the world, and you are still enrolled and you're on active status under your SEVIS program, as long as you are fulfilling the obligations of taking your online courses, and of course, talking and communicating with your DSOs, because that's so imperative. Most of these offices of international students and your DSOs, they're knowledgeable people. They've been doing this for a very long period of time, and we encourage that communication. I do it regularly with my clients and my F1 students who come to me, and I indicate to them that you must absolutely speak with them, because when you do, you're going to have a little bit more information in addition to how your university is handling that online procedure. Because remember, that's also university specific. It can be some of the universities are going to do accommodations. Some of them might be reopening campuses at some point. And so it's imperative that you guys stay in touch with your DSOs, go to the landing pages that your university has offered and provided for instruction and information on how to deal with your F1 current status, OPT, CPT, and STEM OPT, because they update those regularly. In addition to that, I have also checked with several other universities, and I've looked and seen they're doing a really good job of making sure that they're posting that information to you in real time with any information that's coming down from USCIS and from State Department. So that's another source for you to be able to take. So all non-immigrant students should participate in online classes, and they can maintain active status. The courses can be taken full-time online within the United States and abroad. In order to maintain your status, students will absolutely need to continue to participate and be enrolled full-time. You want your immigration status to remain active, and everybody's worried about that. What will happen? Will it not work? No, everybody's aware, and you have to take those online courses. Now, whether those online courses will be 20 hours, 50 hours, 150 hours, or they're going to be substantially reduced hours from what you would be doing in classroom, that has been noted by USCIS, it's been noted by SEVP, and there is flexibility as to that. So if the university is actually offering the online classes and they're offering those alternative learning procedures, you are compliant. And so you don't have to worry so much about, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I'm not taking as many hours as I would when I was actually in classroom. So again, if you have the internet access while you're abroad and you are participating in your program and on your online classes, you are still considered in active status. So going forward, and for those of you that actually do know about the 5-month rule, and for those of you who don't, I'm here to assist. How does the 5-month rule affect me for enrollment going forward? As most F1 students know, there is a rule that indicates that if you are out of enrollment for a minimum of 5 months or longer, you have to go ahead and redo your entire F1. You're only allowed up to 5 months in order to be able to do this. So how does this affect, or how is this affected by COVID-19? Well, in general, if you're maintaining full-time F1 status until the end of this spring semester, you are entitled to your annual summer vacation under regulations. So under current USCIS regulations, an F1 or a J1 student who is in status during the spring semester and completes that portion for summer vacation, if they're eligible for it, they can go ahead and do it as long as they intend to register for the next semester. Now, how is that going to work in the fall? You're going to ask me, because we don't know what's going to happen 2 months from now, and it is a fluid situation. The reality is that majority of the universities are putting in place right now options for alternative learning and for online classes as we speak for the fall semester. And depending on what ends up happening with social distancing, with the ability to be able to open up classrooms and how they're going to create their own emergency procedures for that sort of thing, at that point, your university will have a unique program that they will set out, and they will work with students to try and determine whether you're going to be coming back in the fall for actual live classes in person, or you will continue to be able to be under the directive here for online learning procedures. So here's what happens. Everyone has this one particular question on their mind, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. It's important. What if I leave the US? A lot of you are young students with parents who are very much worried overseas and have good reason to be. Perhaps you don't have living accommodation here. Perhaps you want to be able to go see your parents and your family during this very stressful time and to be with your loved ones. And as young students, you obviously have that right. As soon as you are able to travel, or if you can arrange to travel, and again, that is done again through your DSOs and them working with both the embassy, and there are procedures through which you need to go with the school in order to be able to get travel permission under COVID-19. If in fact the borders do open, perhaps in a month or so, and you all are traveling abroad, How will that affect you, and what are the ramifications? Should I even travel at this point? I know there's a lot of fear out there that somehow your F1 I-20 will lapse if you leave the United States. That's not true. The reality is, again, if you're taking online courses, if you are perhaps doing summer enrollment, which can be up to 12-hour programs, 15-hour programs, at that point, if you are enrolled, you are considered under active status. And again, you would be working with your DSO and the international offices to make sure that that is taking place. So I did make a nice little note for you all here on slides that if summer enrollment normally has 12 credits for undergraduate students and 10 for graduate students. So even if this is your second graduate degree program here in the United States, it does not matter. Each time, you know, when you roll over for F1 and you're enrolling, each time is considered a quote unquote new situation. And so this pertains to your current level of study. SEVP has also confirmed that remote instruction abroad or in the US, so long as in-person classes have not resumed. And that is something that may be a national policy. We are also looking at wrinkles on this, and I'm sure that some of these bright students that are out there are also wondering the same thing, which is, well, Anjali, what happens if my particular university decides that it's not appropriate to do in-person classes? They are required to be able to provide you with an alternative learning method, which is either online or some other version, and to produce that information. So even if a national stay that doesn't allow for college campuses to open remains in place or is even lifted, and your university decides that, well, we're not really comfortable, our university is a little smaller, we can't accommodate students in person just yet, or maybe your particular state and university where you actually attend is a hot spot, at that point, they will provide online learning and alternative learning procedures, and you will continue to work with your DSO. So that's the most important item for you to remember, that even if you go abroad, you are going to be fine, even if in-person classes are not resumed. And time abroad in full-time remote instruction will not count, and this is very important, will not count towards that 5-month rule. So I know that there were a couple of questions that were given to the SEWA folks early on, and one of those questions, if I recall correctly, was, what's going to happen if I have to go back for 8 months, 9 months? Because we do not know. If you leave the United States, the other concern for majority of the students and for J1 visa holders is, what happens if I leave and the travel ban is lifted, but then all of a sudden COVID-19 cases spike globally or in particular nations, including the United States or your home country, and then all of a sudden, just like we did in March, we see a situation in which the government has to put down a shutdown for travel. What happens then? Well, the answer currently is that as long as you are enrolled in those classes, taking them online, you are abroad or in the United States, it will not affect that 5-month rule, and your F1 SEVIS record will not be terminated. Okay, so I think that's a lot of information to digest for the F1 students. Hopefully they're taking notes, and we'll go to the next slide to give them yet more information. So as you can see, the infographic that I have tried really hard to do for the maze that is navigating the F1 OPT COVID curveball that has hit all of us. It is a really trying time in a student's life right now in order to be able to figure out exactly how do these regulations get affected under emergent circumstances, especially in this current situation where no one was ready. So one of the reasons I put this on there as apply is because a lot of F1 students that call my office, and I know a lot of colleagues who are dealing with this as well, get questions about, there's a fear that you should not apply for OPT because you won't get it in the current circumstances, or perhaps with the job and economic turmoil that is taking place currently. But the reality is there are lots of employers who are still, they've got deep ties with universities, and they've done this for a long period of time, and they are looking for good students. So still apply, apply, apply. And remember that just like your remote instruction for classes, the good news is that USCIS, SEVP, and even your DSOs and your schools are working with employers to do teleworking. And ICE, which actually governs this area of F1 participation with SEVIS, it has said we are flexible, which is the actual language I believe that they used, that they have an intent to relax their standards and encourage teleworking as an option. So if you can work very closely with your current OPT employer and your DSO, you can have your I-20s updated if required by the university guidelines or by USCIS, which is not requiring it right now under the temporary situation with COVID-19. And you can go ahead and update that information with the DSO. And as long as you guys are maintaining some documentation regarding how the teleworking is going, how are you modulating and putting in your timesheets to make sure that you're compliant, you're still a go for working. Now, the second curveball. What happens if we have a reduction in hours, which is happening to a lot of F1 students? It's happening to H1s. It's happening to individuals who are on exchange programs that are trainees as well. So what happens when we're having to deal with a reduction in hours? Well, a reduction in hours is significant if the petitioner application that's been filed on behalf of the student employee indicated that he or she would be working full time. What does full time really mean? Well, to the rest of the world and most of us, it means 40 hours per week. And for some of us, like yours truly, it means a little longer sometimes, but that's okay. For you guys, it means that you need to maintain 35 hours or more per week. And that's something that is right now also, again, flexible to some extent. They have indicated that if the reduction in hours changes the employee's status to part-time, that would be considered a quote unquote material change. Well, what does that mean? Legally, a material change would mean that that will affect your status potentially, but they are indicating that there is flexibility. Let's say if it's 35 hours and you're right on the crux between 32 and 35, if there's documentation between yourself, the employer, and your DSO, and you all are working to make sure that this is not a material change, that it might just be because of working off-site, or even if you're having to work abroad and you're actually logging in and you're doing some type of IT work. At that point, as long as you're logging in hours and you're working with your DSO, you should be fine. Now, how do we deal with furloughs at this point? One more caveat on the 35 hours or more per week. If there is a material change, you would need to file an amended petition, and there would be notification made to the DSO, but I've got a whole slide for that a little later on as well. So going on to furloughs, any of you that have been furloughed that were students that were on OPT, apart from this being very stressful, and we understand that there's a lot of fear associated with that terminology, because what exactly does a furlough mean? Does it impact my F1 status? And the answer is it does if you are working pursuant to OPT. For students who are on OPT, they have a maximum of 90 days in order to be able to avail themselves of unemployment grace period, from what we call it. It's a layman's term for grace period, but the reality is that you have a maximum of 90 days for unemployment. Students on a STEM OPT extension are allowed a total of 150 days of unemployment, and those also would be any time accrued on OPT, okay? F1 students should monitor these dates really carefully, and they have to work with their designated student officer, DSO, if they're concerned about maintaining F1 status. And one of the reasons you want to do that is because your DSO will be able to assist you in determining whether or not you're actually going to be able to get to another eligible OPT employer, because they do have records of those. And if one employer is going through financial difficulty, or they're having some type of a situation where you do have to be furloughed, understand that that employer may want to retain you, but because of the current economic situation cannot. And those are considered special circumstances. And there are considerations for that as well that we can go over, and it would be beneficial for you to speak with either an attorney independently as counsel, or to speak with your DSOs with, because there are options to be able to have other employers and have your I-20 actually changed in those situations. And you should be actively pursuing with your DSO, if you are furloughed, alternative options that would include other employers who are willing to take on F1 OPT right now. Now on to the next one. What are the options for discretionary relief? And I'm sorry, we'll go back to the last one. There was one little last curveball that we had to go over, which was discretionary relief. So is there any actually? There are options to be able to request authorization to work off campus. And that is something that is happening right now, because if campus is closed, you effectively cannot work on campus. And the DSOs know that. So what ends up happening? You speak with your DSO. If your university has those options, you can avail yourself of those. And the DSO will certify that information on your I-20. And yes, a lot of folks are being allowed to work off campus, and it's a really good idea to do so as well. Remember, OPTs are not tethered to the campus. This is a distinction between the J1 exchange visitors who work on their OPT information and those who might be trainees. This is something that you need to understand very carefully, that the options for working off campus are absolutely viable. And the majority of universities in this current situation are not only advising it, they're encouraging it, and they're working with employers in the community to do it. So those approved may work off campus in 1-year intervals to their expected completion date, which again gives you yet one more alternative to be able to extend sort of that time. And now I can go off of the curveballs into the next slide. So this is a question that when I was putting this presentation together, as someone who has a lot of clients who are young students, and nobody wants to see this happen to anyone who's been affected by COVID-19. It's another layer of stress, and we all want you to stay healthy, absolutely. But what do you do if you're self-quarantined or affected? Because on top of the stress of having to deal with, what do I do about my F1 status? What if I'm forced to have to travel? What if I'm having to self-quarantine at home? And now I'm also not able to do my online classes. What do we do? That is something that I can't imagine the amount of concern and anxiety that it would cause to a student. And so I decided that it would be best to be able to give you some tools in that arena as well. So a lot of you may not know this because you're happy and healthy, and may it always stay that way. But there is an option at most universities for a medical reduced course load. What exactly is that? Well, they determine your eligibility on the basis of whether or not you have a medical situation or condition, or you're undergoing some type of medical emergency that would affect your ability to be able to attend classes. So what are those options if you can't maintain full-time studies due to those medical reasons, including self-quarantining? Because we know one thing, which is that we don't know the exact extent of how COVID-19, if you're affected by it or you do catch it, how long you're actually having to deal with symptoms, because you may be self-quarantining for 14 or 15 days, but you could ostensibly be getting better in 7, or you might take 3 weeks to get better. So what happens at that point for our F1 students? Well, you have available options that'll depend upon your circumstances. And I'm sure that, every question that's ever been asked to a lawyer the answer is, it depends. But the reality is it does depend on your university, and you're working with your DSO because they are aware of the situation. This is globally impacting everyone, and so it's not an unknown medical situation. If you can't complete your academic program by the end of your I-20 2019 end date, you may be eligible for an extension based on that medical reduced course load. And the majority of universities actually have a procedure through which you will apply, and your DSO would actually assist you in that regard to be able to file that for you, to look for potential extensions of your ability to be able to complete your course load. And if that is not an option, because let's say it's a medical condition that goes a little bit longer than is anticipated, 2 months, 3 months, and we're running into the 5-month rule or some other complication, at that point, you do have an option for transferring to another university that might be able to accommodate you and might actually have a medical reduced course load opportunity that might work with your program and what's going on in your personal circumstances. And you can also look at the alternative of a change of status. And I know that that sends shockwaves sometimes through the community, and people worry because, and understandably so, that what am I going to do? How is that going to happen? Is USCIS actually doing things timely and that sort of thing? The best thing you can do at that point is to check with an attorney, work with your DSO also, and I would encourage you that a change of status, if required, let's say for an extended period of time or for some medical reason, if you have to switch over to another non-immigrant visa, it can be done. And then you can always switch back over to your F1 and work with your DSO to be reinstated as well. So hopefully that will help any of our students who hopefully are not affected by COVID-19. But if you do have a medical situation that is also outside of COVID-19, this will keep you in the know as far as that's concerned and give you yet one more alternative. And now we can go to the next opportunity to give you some more information. So this looks complicated, and it is. You have to literally have a degree in order to be able to be an F1 student to understand OPT, STEM OPT, and CPT. It's a convoluted situation in which we know that right now they're not giving complete information about that you all would need and want. But we are waiting to see how this is going to play out, and they have provided us some guidance in the interim. And one of those is that you need to understand what are the reporting requirements for employment changes to OPT, STEM OPT, and CPT, and are they different? And the answer is yes, they are. So a lot of the F1 students will take it upon themselves because they're responsible, and as students, they will be worried that, what do I do if I end up having a furlough, a reduction in hours, a change in my employment situation? I am working completely online or telecommuting. What do I do then? Because you know that that information has to be conveyed to your I-20 as well in order to stay compliant under SEVIS, because all of that information goes to ICE. So how are they dealing with it under the current circumstances? Well, under regular regulations, if you are on CPT, your DSO is required to disclose full or part-time employment through SEVIS to ICE. And so if you have a reduction in hours, if you have anything else that is going on with CPT, you will go to your DSO, you will talk with them, and they will adjust the information on your I-20 as is required. Now understand that when you're dealing with CPT, it's slightly different because you are not over with your program. This is something that is absolutely tied to your program, and so it has different rules and regulations to it. The next step in this, in looking at how does it affect OPT students, well, we know that OPT 12 students, and that's what we're naming them, is the one-year students. Those students are required to report any interruptions to their DSO, interruptions in their employment. So if there's a situation in which it looks like the employer that you're with is either going to furlough you, your employment might be terminated, or there might be a situation in which you have to do any type of work that's going to be off, not actually in place, it's going to have to be telecommuting. At that point, those are considered changes that are an interruption to your normal work mode, and then those have to be reported to your DSO, who are then responsible to update it in SEVIS. Now, for STEM 24, what do we do? You need to work 20 hours at least, and you need to make sure that, and the employer and student must report and modify any material changes, which includes that decrease in hours, if you have any, on modified training programs that are submitted to your DSO. And For STEM, this is very important because if you're on a STEM 24, you absolutely need to work at least 20 hours per week to maintain status. Now, is there wiggle room is always the question. What's going to happen right now? Well, if you're at 19 hours, you do need to speak with your DSO and modifications for anything that is a quote unquote material change, which is a larger amount of change. If you're looking at a situation where it's going to be 19 and a half hours, you can talk to your DSO and that would not most likely be considered a material change. However, it is recommended that if you're going to have anything lower than 20 hours, you do speak with your DSO. The DSO and the employer and you stay in constant communication as to what are the reasons why that reduction has taken place. Is it because the hours are reduced for that particular employer? Because each one of these is a different situation. Now, as far as termination goes or furlough, generally this will require a student, the DSO, and potentially the employer to report changes through 𝐂𝐵𝐴𝑠. For STEM OPT, if that employment terminates or ends prior to your authorized OPT period, an update will be required within 5 days of notification of that change. So how does that really work? Well, if the employer that you're working with decides that, well, we're looking at a situation and they give you a week or two's notice that there might be a situation in which you might be furloughed, it would be best for you to go ahead and speak with your DSO the moment that you do know, because it'll give your DSOs a little bit of time to be able to deal with reporting, potentially finding you a different employer, and moving forward in that process. Because at this point, you're probably aware that your DSOs aren't sitting on campus either. And so they also need a little bit of time because everything is being done electronically, and they're also trying to work from home potentially and go ahead and give them that extra time. So hopefully this has given you a little bit more of a roadmap as to your requirements. So we can go to the next slide. So how now, and we're going to go ahead and transition into some of the J1 information, because I know that F1 students are very worried, and they have every right to be, and we're worried for you as well. But what about the exchange visitors? J1 is a slightly different animal, and I know that a lot of information that has been requested from individuals calling on the helpline for SEWA have been regarding what is the impact on J1 visa holders? How is it going to work? And they're justifiably worried and scared. So let's transition into and try to provide some information on this. J1, as those individuals who are on it and are familiar with it, covers a myriad of different types of programs, and way too extensive for me to go into in this short period of time on each and every one of them. But what I am going to do is I'm going to gear this towards those individuals that we know are going to be impacted immediately, number one. Number two, who it hits an impact on. So we'll go through those highlights. There is right now an automatic J1 program extension in response to COVID-19. You are currently automatic to May 31st, 2020. This was issued in early April. And I think a lot of you may or may not know about this, but the Department of State has implemented an automatic 2-month extension to program end dates that are in 𝐶VIS on active records, with end dates for your program between April 1st to May 31st, to allow J1s to finish educational or training programs or to continue to finalize their travel plans. Is the Department of State aware that there's a travel restriction in place? Yes, they are. And unfortunately or fortunately, we wanted to see an extension of this beyond the May 31st date, which now we're coming up on pretty soon. We are expecting some guidance and some information for this to be provided soon, hopefully, and for it to be either an automatic rollover for an extension into this for the next 30 days, or if not, to provide us with additional guidance, since those travel restrictions are not expected to be lifted immediately. So from our current guidance and our information right now, this extension, do you as a J1 have to actually do anything in order to avail yourself of this extension? Currently, This is supposed to be automatic in 𝐶VIS, and you can check with your sponsor, but the reality is that we've been told that it's supposed to be automatic in 𝐶VIS, and we have been seeing it with our clients as well. The Department of State has indicated that they will work with sponsors to push for reinstatement and extensions in 𝐶VIS for March completions and those who are maybe stranded due to travel issues. So this is something that they're fully aware of, and they're trying to work with program coordinators to see what they can do in specific to make sure that they are working to make sure that you all understand what the reinstatement options are and what extension options are with your sponsors. Now, the sponsors will be given that information as well. Sponsors are always remaining responsible for those of you that are in active status on 𝐶VIS. And why is that important? Well, one of the reasons why is you may or may not know what your sponsor program is responsible for under J1. They may tell you that we've terminated the program early. You have to go back. If you do, and we have slides for that coming up in a minute, the reality is that at some point that communication has to take place with the sponsors, and it also is going to be going back to the individuals at Department of State who are actively working on this on each and every single situation. And we have seen that they are working with sponsors directly. And so we are looking for potential extensions in certain areas, which will be on hopefully the next slide that I have for you. So how do we deal with the J1 pandemonium among the pandemic? How do you deal with your program disruption? How do you deal with travel? How is it actually impacting the programs that you all are under as exchange visitors? Well, due to the diverse number of programs and circumstances, I've really tried hard to highlight those that are impacting J1s in our community that mostly are interns and trainees and who are dealing with work situations that are related to their active J1 status. So it's a worrisome issue, and you'll notice that I've put up the traffic lights, and there's a reason for that, because where a lot of you are under the impression and you're stressed about, does the program disruption mean everything ends abruptly? What do I do? Do I have to contact an embassy and get on a plane? There are options, and there's information regarding this that you need to know. So specifically for interns and trainees, when resumption of programs in person is safe and practicable, the Department of State has said that they will consider requests for extensions beyond the maximum duration that you are allowed. And so this is, again, a fluid situation. They're looking at what are the options. They're looking at where can we consider requests for extensions and what can we do about it. So this is something that you will have to work with your sponsor with. In addition to that, there are some issues regarding compensation of time that might be lost by exchange visitors who had disruptions to their programs. And so the department has indicated very clearly that they're aware of this and that they are knowing that there are a lot of programs where you guys have to return home prematurely due to circumstances that are way beyond your control. And that when these things do resume, they're going to look at those extensions and opportunities through sponsors and work with them diligently to do that. With regard to work, active J1s and sponsors, have a need to balance social distancing with their monetary needs, and they have to adhere to shelter-in-place orders. And that includes orders that might indicate non-essential work that has to be shut down. If you are perhaps working with an essential business that can stay open under shelter-in-place orders in that particular state, you are required to be able to comply with those orders. As far as your hours that have to be worked, 32 hours is the work requirement for interns, for teachers, and trainees, and those all remain in place because they are governed by regulation, and that has not changed yet. But they are allowing for some deviations. And when I use the word deviation, I'm talking about changes in time for your work program and work requirements that might be tied to those either shelter-in-place orders or for particular orders that might be central to that particular state. And so they're willing to also look at those options with your sponsors and to deal and discuss those on an individual case-by-case basis. One more thing I want to bring up for our J1s that is important to know that they may not know, because this is not advertised a lot, and this is true for almost every J1, is that sponsors are required to extend insurance for exchange visitors that they already had in place. Any of the programs that have been extended by 60 days under any kind of Department of State regulation that is in place for this temporary period, they are required, your sponsors are required to extend insurance as well. So that's important as a caveat. For our research scholars, program active status can be extended with your sponsor even if you return to your home country, and that's very crucial. This is something that research scholars, because of the unique nature of the program that they are dealing with, need to speak very directly with their sponsors with, because a lot of the sponsors are actually assisting you while you're abroad to keep your program active status as long as you are a research scholar, even if you have to return to your home country. And so that is very important to note. If you are in a J1 program as an exchange visitor that allows you to be able to talk with your sponsor about perhaps having to change your program to one of the research positions or research scholar situation, or there's flexibility built into that sponsorship program, you might want to speak with them about that as well. As far as some of the updated information that you might want to know, sponsors, as I said before, are considered responsible for each one of the exchange visitors up until the point that you are here in the United States and in active status under SEVIS. So that is something to be able to bring up with them and speak openly with your sponsors with as well. And I think now we can hit the green light on the traffic light and go to the next slide. So, what are our special considerations for J1 categories? And I've tried to include these for the specific types of J1s that would be impacted in terms of the South Asian community and what they mostly come in on for J1 exchange visitor visas. And this does not include secondary school students, which is a whole other area. So these are mostly for our physicians and our trainees and our teachers and current exchange visitors who are on that flexible J. And so for those individuals who are our doctors, and this is very important, we know that they have got to do what is known as an SON letter, which is, these are specific to the issue of whether or not the doctors have the ability to be able to provide a statement that indicates that from a Ministry of Health that they're able to come here and to do this under need. Well, those SON letters can't be waived under regulations, but under the current COVID-19 situation, they are allowing for some flexibility. And one of the reasons why is because they know that none of these things can be actually done at an embassy or a Ministry of Health in person, because globally a lot of those are shut down and a lot of those individuals are also working from home under all of the lockdowns that are still in place. And so they are allowing the Ministry of Health organizations in your particular home country and embassy letters to be able to be issued digitally. And so that is important, and it is something that you want to work very closely with those individuals that are going to be helping you with this at the embassy or at the Ministry of Health to do. And a lot of them are also aware of this, and so they will assist you in that regard. There may be a little bit of lag time because it is digital, but this is something that has been in place now for quite some time since the COVID-19 situation lockdown occurred back in March. Also, for those individuals who are doctors currently, that there's no new SON that will be absolutely required for any fellowship training if you already have an SON on file. And why is that important? Well, that's one less hoop that you have to jump through at this point, because there's plenty already to deal with. And so that's hopefully going to help some of our J1 doctors. For previously approved clients or applicants who have had program suspensions, if you've been approved in a training program under J1, and you've had a program suspension, which includes the sponsor going ahead and suspending the program, or it being suspended under COVID-19, what are the options? Well, they can delay your start date for one, and that's something you want to talk directly with the sponsor with. For current exchange visitors, you can continue to be on programs and engage in cross-cultural activities as well. But you have to be careful about documenting any changes that might take place, or if you're not able to do everything according to plan and under the program in terms of hours. So that's something you want to work very specifically with your program sponsors with. And there is guidance regarding the documentation and protocol for that. It's a little bit much to go into here, but at the end of the program, I've got some links for you guys to be able to go to. And again, you can always check in with a knowledgeable attorney, and they will assist you as well in order to be able to understand exactly what those are. So for our teachers, they're also undergoing a tremendous amount of stress right now, and they also are having their programs affected under J1. So those teachers that are needing to file for an immediate extension, how do you deal with your requests? Well, the guidance currently is that you go ahead and you'll fulfill your extension request, and you should do so even if you're having difficulty obtaining your admin letters that are absolutely essential to the paperwork if you've done this before. But don't worry, because they're aware that it's a difficult prospect getting your admin letters and potentially getting them in timely. And so the EAC has also indicated that they're going to work with sponsors carefully to see if you can go ahead and produce that information as it comes in. What the current guidance is for our teachers is to go ahead and fulfill your paperwork as much as you possibly can, get everything in line, and anything that might be missing, including your admin letters, right now, go ahead and submit your paperwork even if you don't have it, because they've indicated that they are going to work closely with the sponsors to obtain it. And hopefully that will help all of our other special J1 category folks. There's just so much impact to all of you, and I'm hoping that some of this will be helpful as we go to the next slide. So to provide you with a little bit more information and perhaps to arm you with some more knowledge in addition to what I've presented here for you, I want you all to be able to avail yourself of some of these links. You may or may not know about them, and I know that everybody, including the first thing we do is we turn to the internet and we ask, what can I find? And we Google it. Well, we don't have to. I've provided some of it for you here. As you notice, the first link is one for J1 visas, and that does give updated material and information, and it is in depth. I can tell you right now, because there's almost 14 pages of information based on each individual type of J1 visa and each program, and it goes in depth, and I'm happy to provide some of that information as an update to SEWA for any questions that anyone might have that they can give to them as well. The next one you'll see is from NAFSA, and this will provide you with ECA and exchange program sponsor information. There are definitive links for not just sponsors, but for those of you that are affected and who are exchange visitors, and it will go over a lot of the information that I have provided for you here, but it will continue to update. And they have provided us with guidance indicating that they are aware of what is happening, and they want to make sure that they're providing guidance as we go along. It's slow coming because it's a fast-moving target, and there's a lot of things for them to cover, but we do anticipate additional information for the exchange visitors, in addition to the fact that we are watching very carefully, that they are working with them very carefully to make sure that they can assist you all through embassies to be able to get travel arrangements for those of you J1s that absolutely have to go back once travel restrictions allow, and for special accommodations for you to be able to travel. And that's being done through embassies. F1s, you have to continuously keep checking your individual university pages and keep your lines of communication open with your DSOs to get COVID-19 online guidance that they're updating regularly. I know that it's on the mind of all F1 students and all immigration attorneys right now. what's going to happen to the OPT program based on potential comments that were made this last week by the administration and individuals working with the administration. Right now, there is no policy initiative that has been announced yet. If there is one, I can assure you that SEVP is watching it carefully. Your DSOs are watching it carefully. Universities have a spotlight on this as much as immigration attorneys do as well, for your benefit, and to be watching it carefully. If there is any announcement that does come out that affects OPT, I will advise all of our F1 students to keep in mind that any policy initiatives or any executive orders that might be made, and immigration attorneys, we spend a lot of time thinking about this, and we are, as a bar collectively for the Immigration Lawyers Association. At this point, there will be questions regarding how that will go forward. And so if there is news, I would advise everyone to take a deep breath and wait for guidance, and to see how it may or may not come out, and not immediately, for lack of better terminology, panic. So as far as your OPT is concerned, the information that I have provided for you here is up to date. It is highly recommended that you consult with an experienced immigration attorney about change of status options. And that's not a plug from an immigration attorney. This is literally for your best interest. There are going to be situations for some of our F1 and our J1 students, and even for our H1Bs, that are going to require the facilitation of a change in status to another non-immigrant visa. For a lot of our F1 students who might be facing OPT challenges and might be looking at furloughs or terminations, there are other alternatives for you to stay here and to be able to transition back once things become a little clearer for fall semester, or perhaps even for a spring semester, and so for the following year. So don't give up. You need to be able to reach out and see what you can do if you're not planning on traveling back to your home country. And again, I hope that this has helped to be able to ease your minds on some of the questions that you had regarding what are my options. For those of you that actually want to be able to look at some of the information regarding me, which I'm not plugging, but I honestly didn't know, I want to give you guys some information about me because you don't know who I am yet. You can go ahead and find me out on LinkedIn. I'm also a real attorney with the Fort Bend Bar Association, and I'm licensed by the Texas Bar. I'm also a former officer of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and a member, and a proud member for the last 20 years plus. So I hope that this information has provided you all with some calm, some ease, and it's empowered you to understand a few things about a very fast-moving situation. I do want to stop with this comment. It is really, it impacts us also as immigration attorneys. We know what you're going through. We know how hard it is to be dealing with a moving target. And we want you to know that we are there to provide the guidance and information as it comes down. You will face these challenges with us, and we will all get through this together. And I hope that all of you will stay healthy, safe, and in your programs, and look forward to making sure that we keep you here and that you help us move forward.
Thank you, Anjali. That was very informative, and I think very relevant in the current situation. With your permission, I know we had planned for an hour, but with your permission, we do have a couple questions that have come in from students. So if you are okay with going a little over time, we would like to at least address a couple of them.
Yeah, sure. And if there are general questions that'll actually help these folks, no problem.
Okay, perfect. So I'll try to take the generic ones first. For students and those who are on current visas that have expired or are expiring in the near future, very soon, what is, how can the student make sure that their unlawful stay because of the current situation is not, how are they not affected by that?
So that was part of the slides presentation when we're everybody is aware that there are travel restrictions and F1s can't just get on a plane and fly back to their home country. So if you're working with your DSOs and you're working with the universities, they actually have provided information if you're on OPT, if you're on CPT, if you're actually fully enrolled. They will work with you to be able to determine exactly how you can stay enrolled, because online programs are different. Now, let's assume that there's a situation in which an F1 student may not be able to pay tuition fees, or they're in a circumstance in which they're facing financial difficulty. Well, we have a remedy for that. There is an actual regulation that attorneys like myself have used on a routine basis for H-1Bs. Love my H-1s. I can't wait to do an entire webinar just for them. The answer is that there are special circumstances and extraordinary circumstances, and they are built in. This is regulations that have been there on the books. We know how to use them. Your DSOs are also familiar with them for universities that have been established for a really long period of time. And so if we have to do extensions, if we have to do modifications, if we have to do amendments, if there's a situation in which your unlawful time has to be dealt with when you go for another F1, let's say you go back home for 3-4 months to be with mom and dad as soon as this lifts, and you're not subject to the 5-month rule, which I've already gone over because that's been temporarily suspended as well, then at that point, there is a special circumstances situation, and there is economic such situations in which you can actually apply to have your OPT time reduced. And if you need to have that done, you would want to talk to a knowledgeable attorney. And yes, there are options. And these are called extraordinary circumstances. They have to be handled correctly. It's not an automatic. But what other extraordinary circumstances can you believe beyond COVID-19 at this point, where the world is in lockdown? So this is what's interesting, and I think it's important, right? We're isolated a lot, and we always feel like this is impacting us as F1 students, but the reality is this is globally affecting every F1, every non-immigrant. And so understand that if you're accruing unlawful presence, someone else is as well, and they're not going to bar students effectively that we understand currently from all the signals that we're getting. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think another question that many may have is, what is the current processing time for OPT applications during these weird situations?
Yes, and everybody wants, that's the billion-dollar question right now. And I would perhaps win the lottery if I was the attorney that had my crystal ball, and most of the time I do. But at this point, I would say after 22 years of watching this stuff, we usually have a good feeling in our thumbs and our pinkies about how this works. But I will tell you this, it is dependent, and this is factually just the way it works. It is currently dependent on how your DSOs are actually updating that information or providing it back over to SEVIS. And as we know, local offices for USCIS are now opening. The service centers have, just like us, because they're also human beings, those officers, they actually were under orders to telecommute for work purposes. We've been seeing fluctuations in terms of processing time for different types of applications. For some reason, it seems that H1s are a little bit easier to do from home for these officers than other types of applications. But for OPT, because there are so many extensions coming into play and there are so many other things that are going on, there is a point at which you might see a slight delay. And I've been working, I had a client that I was working with just recently, for those of you individuals who might be on OPT or CPT that were also chosen and won the lottery for H-1B this year. A lot of you are having to get your I-20s updated. You might be transferring programs. We are seeing a bit of a delay, but it's not huge. We're actually seeing that the only breakdown in terms of time is from DSOs who are flooded with requests. And so by the time they're able to digitally upload this and get the information to and filed, it's taking a little longer. So a lot of our students are turning to attorneys to assist, to see how they can get some of those applications, or they can actually get consultations on how to deal with those so they can assist their DSOs faster. We're all going to have to take a little bit of a deep breath and wait. It's not affecting anything currently. They're also aware that the pipeline is a little bit clogged right now. So it's just about patience, and hopefully within the next month or two, we see a little bit of a change as we go forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anjali. I think you answered a lot of questions, even in your presentation. So I'm sure for those who I didn't get to ask publicly, they'll still probably have already received their answers.
I hope so.
Yeah, and that was very insightful. Along with thanking you for all the information, I would also like to thank all our organizations who've come together today to, bring this amazing piece of information to everyone. Unite and Inspire, Hindu University of America, Hindu YUVA, Bharatiyam, and Vivekananda House. Would like to really thank you for all the knowledge that you've given us today. Hindu YUVA, Bharatiyam, and Vivekananda House, which are three of our partnering organizations for this webinar, have also launched a student support network helpline, which actually aims to provide support to students. This is an unprecedented time, very difficult situation, especially for our international students who don't have a home to go to here. And so in these hard times, we want to be able to provide help wherever we can with accommodation or immigration issues like this one, or even with helpful information with webinars, or be it facilitating the essentials like groceries and medication. So if any students need help, please do not hesitate to call the helpline. I will share the number right now so that you can find that information. And please do not hesitate to call us. The number is 802-750-YUVA, which is 9882. You can call us for any of the following concerns, and we can try to direct you to the right facility if we're not able to provide it. So once again, we're really grateful for our partner organizations, Hindu YUVA, Bharatiyam, Vivekananda House, and Sewa International, to bring along this support system for the students. Anjali, do you want to say anything for any closing remarks?
I want to thank every single organization here. I've worked with Sewa before, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to know that you all are doing so much for the community, truly. Unite and Inspire is close to my heart, and I can't stress enough how amazing and how wonderful it is to be able to partner with organizations like this that provide so much help to the community. The work you do is supported, and we're proud of it, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to help individuals in this very difficult time. And honestly, my heart goes out to every F1 student, every exchange student. I've had calls, so many of them from around the country. And if I could manage to give as much information as possible, I would. And I want to thank you guys for doing this, because I think that there are so many of those students that absolutely need that support and that caring, and don't we all? So thank you guys for the opportunity and for the ability to be able to reach out and help, just like you are.
Thank you so much,
Anjali.
That was great content, and I'm sure the students who were watching really appreciate the time you took to put that together. Again, thank you, and thank you to all our partner organizations. Thanks, Niyati. And from Sewa International, again, a big thank you, and hope the viewers got some good information out of this session. As you know, we have other sessions coming up, so keep an eye out on the Sewa International page to see the upcoming webinars. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Namaste.